Welcome back to Port Elizabeth, the beautiful city. This is part 9. I'm starting with a view of St. Augustine's Roman Catholic Cathedral in Whites Road. It's near the start of this walk, which I did in 2014. So this is one of the oldest buildings in PE, and it dates back to, let's have a look here, 1866. So today, on this outing on the 16th of July 2014, we got to look at the Harbour Board Building, which is the main focus. And tragically, I'm going to have to tell you that that building is one of the greatest Art Nouveau buildings in South Africa. Is now an absolute wreck. Its roof has all the lead has been stolen off it. It's leaking like a sieve. It's been vandalized within, fittings stripped out, and I don't hold out any hope for it. Anyway, I was lucky to get to it on this occasion and get inside. I didn't see everything. I later saw people posted lovely pictures of other parts of the building, which I hadn't seen, but you'll see. Anyway, we also walked past the Feather Market Hall, which is another real feature of Old Port Elizabeth. The actual hall is 1885. Plainace is another feature. It's a sort of Art Deco, not really, almost Gothic-looking building. Bit of Main Street, which they foolishly renamed, Whites Road, which they foolishly renamed, Donkin Street, which they've renamed. Oh no, that one survived, sorry. So anyway, let's start in Whites Road, which is where I parked. And as I walk down, were excavations continuing, and the first sort of sign of foundations for the extension to the Opera House. So I had no idea, although there was an image, a board which showed what it would look like, but I was actually very impressed with the final product, which we'll see in much later posts. So this is a view of St. Augustine's through the lovely palms that there are next to it. Sorry, I must just try and focus on the camera, not on what's on the laptop here. So this is a view down across the Market Square with the library on the left, Market Square on the right, still used as a parking lot at this point by the councillors, and the Campanile. So the Campanile would have been visible in the old days when this, where I'm indicating here, used to be Jetty Street. So it would have dropped steeply down towards the main North Jetty, next to which at the sort of start of the jetty, they built the Campanile. So the jetty was a prominent sort of feature of Old Port Elizabeth, and the Campanile was located right next to it and the harbour, and the railway station. Anyway, there we have St. Augustine's, and it also has these really interesting sort of Mediterranean looking buildings attached, So it's not just the church itself. I also love these buildings. That's the one I showed earlier. In fact, I walked past here quite recently, and this door has been vandalized somewhat, and there was a comment pasted on by the church. I can't remember what it said, but it was a sort of warning that there might be divine retribution, I think. So this is a real landmark, actually, when you look at photographs from the Donkin Reserve, early photographs from the 1860s and 70s. You can see this building is so prominent. This is a little view down from adjacent to the building down to the Market Square, and that's a view now up Prospect Hill. So from this point, if you had to turn around 180 degrees and look up the hill, that's what you'd see. So really steep, and there at the top, on the left, just there, is the drill hall of the Prince Alfred's Guard. And you look at this building here, I don't think it's got its roof anymore. But, you know, these buildings in Prospect Hill are among the more historic, or most historic in the city. They were well preserved. So there's a nice detail of the hinges, lovely elaborate sort of hinges. I wouldn't be surprised if attempts have been made to steal those. So again, with the light, the winter sunlight is really conducive to nice photographs because it provides for these crisp sort of little areas of shade. Now this is Plainhace, another wonderful building which the new government has stuck that ugly sign on renamed it and stuck that ugly blue sign on it. But yeah, you can see the detail. I don't know if I've got the age of this thing. So this used to, I think it still does contain a lot of the municipal offices. And as a reporter, I would often have to pop in there to meet certain people, get press releases or whatever. I think I picked up the council agenda in there, that's correct. So for council meetings, and there's, I think, our first view since I've started this project of the Feather Market Hall. Now the Feather Market Hall is actually just really this, you'll see there's two stone buildings behind this front sort of section, which today is the kind of foyer for events happening behind. In my history of Port Elizabeth, a book that I had published called 200 Years, you can see how this building first stood alone, and then they added this in about 1910. Yeah, so the Feather Market Hall itself was 1885, that stone building. And this from about 1910, but it was crumbling in the late 80s. It was about to collapse. And they did a wonderful restoration project, turning this whole thing into a concert hall. So you can see at this point I was pretty proud of the beautiful city. It hadn't been allowed to deteriorate that badly, but I was catching it just at the end. I mean, we'd been 2014, we'd had ANC government for 10 years, and initially I think they did fairly well across the country. I mean, we had economic growth in the early 2000s of around 5% annually. It wasn't bad, considering that now it's stagnant and we even no growth, And there's a lovely side view looking down. So we're walking up White's Road here. Not White's Road, Castle Hill. Look how steep it is. And then if you turn around, you look down towards the side of the City Hall, which itself dates from around 1860. And on the right here is the clock tower of the old post office, as it's colloquially known. So here a detail on the Feather Market Hall sort of front structure, and this is the coat of arms of Port Elizabeth. Oopsie. So here we get the two original stone buildings. There's a magnificent organ installed inside the main lower building. So this is where they sold ostrich feathers. It was a big market for ostrich feathers in the 1890s. I think the First World War killed that off, essentially. It had a bit of a revival after the war. And they said at one stage ostrich feathers were worth their weight in gold or something. It was actually incredible. A big fashion item at the time. So here is the whole place, sort of view down with the City Hall in the distance, Plain House on the left. And this is the southern side, the back really of St. Augustine's, seen from Castle Hill. With the sun, you can see that north-west setting sun sort of making photography quite difficult. And then this community chest sign they left, when they did the restoration, they deliberately left this because the community chest was such an important part of the city's heritage, and it was housed there for a while. So this was a way of raising funds to feed the poor and so forth. So heading back down on to, that's Main Street in the distance, and we're actually in Upper Barkin Street here, I think. Maybe Main Street continues up with Plain House on the left. And there, looking down the end of Main Street or the start of Barkin Street, I'm not quite sure, is the Herald Building in the middle, which is where I worked for 32 years. This is the Feather Market Hall on the right, and the old post office, whose roof, sadly, was totally modernized, and they basically have lost all the character of this building. There's a whole floor of sort of, I forget the architectural term, but almost like attics in the roof. It was a whole beautiful sort of topped this wonderful Victorian, late Victorian building. It just was the icing on the cake for that sort of design, and it's happened all over South Africa. My own building here, we'll get onto it later. So here we can see some dates. 1908, this is the Feather Market Hall building in front, this one. So on one end you've got the date 1908, you can see it there. And I think we get to the other end shortly. That's how it stands next to Plain House. And this is the lovely back of the City Hall. It's a stone, this is the original stonework. So the building was stone. I think the front was brick because I've seen photographs of it while it was being built, and those were bricks, but the back was lovely stone. Here we got the old post office, which has been boarded up. If we'll get onto Barkin Street, we'll see how badly it's just been neglected. But it still had its original colour clock tower there. And then we've got this monument to Prester John. So here's the beautiful back of the City Hall. Imagine this precinct, if you set it up with coffee shops and I've always said this could be the heart of PE's tourist industry. You just got the harbour right nearby. And there it is. I mean, it was built over several, so this section was built after this front section. I think one was the magistrate's court, there was a police station in there somewhere, and then the post office was here. Ultimately, it all became a post office. That's the Prester John. But the roof, as I said, chimneys are removed, lovely sort of attic dormer type windows, I think they're called. So this here tells us a bit about the Old Magistrates Court, 1885, Barkin Street Police Station and Barracks, 1899, Post Office, 1897, that's a section, and it's called a Rhineland-style tower. And here's that Prester John's monument. Beautiful. So it was unveiled in 1986 by the then Portuguese ambassador. He was a mythical king priest, Prester John. Portuguese explorers who discovered South Africa. The memorial consists of a Coptic cross. Yeah. That's just a lovely facade of that Feather Market Hall looking back down. (1881), I think that date says there. That's my old workplace, the Herald. Yeah, 1881. So as I said, at this point, the Herald was still based there, but they moved out in about 2020, sadly, and this whole thing is now just deteriorating rapidly. As you can see, the owner of this place has boarded it up. This has been boarded up, the old post office complex, been boarded up for about 20 years. Who knows what will become of it? The roof was okay. They saved the building by putting on a new roof, but it's certainly not in character. There's the boarding up. Tragic. I mean, one of the most sort of impressive buildings in PE. And there's the Herald Building. So this building here dates from about 1903, I think, and this one from about 1950. Art Deco style there. And this initially only was 3 stories. And then they added this top bit to fit in with that when they did the addition. And this was the old Markham Hotel behind, which has been modernized and student digs now and so forth. Yeah, so this one end of the post office building. So you can see here, established 1845. It's the Herald. Actually, I've got photographs where it says established 1847. And there was a lot of controversy as to whether it was actually 1845, because the guy who established the Herald, Jock Patterson, a Scotsman, he was only about in his early 20s. He had to rename it for a couple of years because of some legal hassle he had. And then he named it back to the Eastern Province Herald. And that's, so it was effectively still the same newspaper, just had to have a new name for technical reasons, legal reasons. So, yeah, there it is, 1903, this building was opened. It was already not really being used when I got here in 84. It was more just for storage. The whole newspaper house was this section on the left. There was a pub in here called the Drain Pipe. And next to it are these wonderful warehouses that date back from the late, maybe mid-19th century. So the shoreline wasn't far from here to the left. Looking back up, there's a nice municipal works, printing works here. And this is how the roof of the old post office deteriorated. Taken in the 2016, it says here, but But anyway, that's you get an idea of how it looked on top. Chimneys, these windows here, all lost. And this is an aerial view just to give you an idea of the location of the thing. Here you can see the deteriorating post office. This is the Feather Market Hall. Plain Ace, that church we saw. This is the library, Market Square, and so forth. Oh, here we've got a nice aerial view of it. Old post office. A labyrinth of old buildings here. I mean, it could really become a really interesting sort of place for the arts and for all sorts of creative things. A museum of PE and I don't know. Yeah, and this, I don't know when to stop because I'm running over time here. I'm going to have to actually complete this in the next video because this is the door into a side building, which we'll see again later once they actually chop these trees back. This is a lovely old historic building next to the Herald. So this is a view back, newspaper house on the left, the old post office on the right. I mean, this is one of the most historic areas, if only they hadn't messed up this post office building. But I'm going to have to call it for now, and we'll rejoin you as we finally get to see the Harbour Board building on the next video. Cheers for now.